This is Financially Fit Radio with Cory Sickles from Safe Harbor Wealth Advisors. Retirement isn't just about saving, it's about having a strategy that helps you navigate market ups and downs, combat inflation, and secure the future you deserve. That's why Financially Fit Radio is here to tackle your biggest financial concerns, share actionable strategies, and help you move toward your retirement goals with confidence. And now, here's Financially Fit Radio with Cory Sickles.
Welcome back to another episode of Financially Fit Radio. I'm Cory Sickles with Safe Harbor Wealth Advisors. If you like more information about anything that is discussed or shared on today's show, feel free to reach out to us. You can give us a call at 614-760-0670, or you can always visit us online at safeharboroh.com. And while you're on our website, feel free to click on that radio page. You can listen to today's shows, previous episodes, and you can also subscribe to our podcast platforms on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or Spotify. Also, feel free to watch today's show on our YouTube channel. Just type in Safe Harbor Wealth Advisors. And make sure you also subscribe. You can keep up to date with all of our short videos that we put out. We put about 3 or 4 videos out a week on just being able to educate you on different types of financial topics. You can also watch today's show, previous shows. Just go to our Financially Fit Radio playlist. Well, today we're going to talk about a question I always get asked, and that is, do I have enough to retire? So what I want to really discuss today is how much should you save for retirement? But before we dive into that topic, let me introduce to you my co-host this week and every week, and that's Tony Shore. Tony, how are you today?
I'm doing good, Cory. I already know the answer to that question. How much should you save for retirement? And the answer is always more than I have, right?
Yep.
It seems like that's always the answer people have, no matter how much or how little you have. And we'll talk about that and why that is. But I've been good. I've had a great week. Got to see my parents over the weekend once again. I usually go down there and see them, help them out. And I had a relaxing day yesterday. I actually had a day to myself. I didn't know what to do. None of the kids were in and out. My wife is out of town on a business trip, so I actually just sat around and watched football. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but
I don't know how relaxing that game was for you. But
well, yeah, the Vikings game got a little tense for me, but
yep.
Yeah, I'm a Vikings fan, and then of course the Gophers game versus the Ohio State, that was as expected. So
it looked good the first drive.
Yeah. We got one good drive in us, so
then it all went to hell, right?
Right. It all went south. So, Cory, how about you? I know you've been busy, haven't you? I asked you what you were doing over the weekend. We were talking before the show. You said you had meetings. I mean, you're a hard worker over there.
Yeah, I had some Saturday morning meetings, something I don't do that often, but
sure.
Yeah, I did. Besides that, did stuff around the house, Tony. Enjoying this weather right now. My God.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
Nice?
Yeah, it's unseasonably warm, even in Minnesota lately.
It's going to be 70s all week this week. I think we're going to dip down in the mid 60s for a couple days. But I enjoy this. So
I do too.
I didn't get to golf this last weekend, but I'll get some golf in this upcoming weekend. Looking forward to that. Football season's prime form right now.
Yeah, it
college
is.
And NFL. I could not believe Penn State lost to UCLA.
No, no one can. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of upsets in the NFL too.
That was I think they said it was like the first time in 40 years that a top 10 team got beat by an 0-4 team.
That's unbelievable.
Yep.
It just shows I like it when that happens once in a while, because it just shows that on any given day, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And I was driving into work today and they were talking about, I mean, one thing Ryan Day does not do is he does not lose to unranked teams. Right. He's had 10 losses since he's been at Ohio State. One of them was against an unranked team. That was against Michigan. And really, 7 of his top 10 losses are against top 5 teams.
Right. Yeah.
And the other interesting fact I heard is as of now, he actually has the all-time winningest percentage. He just passed Newt Rockne at 88.2%.
Wow. Wow. That's huge. Yeah, I remember Newt Rockne. That's amazing. I haven't heard that name in a while.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was back in the 20s
Yeah. Yeah.
and 30s.
Yeah. I remember the name.
Yep.
But I haven't heard it in a while. Wow. Yeah. The Ohio State team is just really good and really well coached. I mean, yeah, a lot of it is coaching too. And
You're-
that's the same with your finances, right, Corey? Look at you. You're a coach for a lot of people.
Yeah,
And you've
exactly
got to
right.
have a coach who's looking out for your best interests and has his eye on the ball and understands the entire overall game plan, which is
Yep.
and it really starts with how much do I need for retirement, right?
It does. It's a common question. People always want to know, do you think I have enough saved? Or they always want to say, how do I compare, versus other people at my age as well? And here's a rule of thumb. Obviously, the earlier you start, the better. But when we start talking about savings, Tony, really what your goal should be is you're saving somewhere between 10 to 15% of your gross income every year. Obviously, if you start earlier, we'll talk about this as we kind of go through, but the earlier you start, the less you're actually going to have to save, as you're kind of approaching retirement as well. That compound interest over time, really helps out. And, the one thing is, here's what I would, even tell you, even if you're in your 20s, even if you could save 10% of whatever that might be, and you might sit there and think, well, that's not a whole lot of money. But, over time, you're going to get increases, right? Salary increases. You're going to keep continuing to add on to that. And before you know it, you're going to have a nice little nest egg there in order to, really prepare for retirement.
Yeah, exactly, Corey. And I think it's really important because you hear a lot of different numbers and rules of thumb out there, but those are really just starting points, aren't they? You need to work with somebody like yourself, and don't try to go it alone because you'll hear different things. You need $1 million to retire, or you need 80% of your current income. And, those are good starting points, but everybody's situation is different. So it's going to change rapidly from there, isn't it?
It is. And obviously, we design plans, we customize them based upon,
Yeah.
everyone's different.
Yep.
Everyone makes a different amount of money. Everyone has a different amount of income that they're going to need in retirement. So, I mean, you can't use the same solution for everybody. But one thing, let's take a few minutes here, Tony, and just kind of talk about how much should you really have saved, depending upon your age.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
So let's just kind of do this. Let's just say you're age 30. By the time you're 30, you should have 1 times your annual salary saved. And I'm going to use $60,000 as an example here as we
Okay.
kind of go through this. But if you earn $60,000, then you should have $60,000 saved by the time you're 30. Now, when you get to 40, now what you're looking at is 3 times your salary. So if you're making $60,000, you need to have $180,000 saved. When you reach 50, now it's 6 times your salary. So again, now you're going to have to hopefully hopefully you have about $360,000 saved. By the time you reach 60, you need to have 8 times, or around $480,000. And by the time you're 67, you need to have 10 times your salary at $600,000. Now, obviously, if you're making more money, Tony, if you're making $100,000 by the time you're 67, that basically means you need to have $1 million.
Yeah. Okay. And that makes sense. And so that helps because everybody's time horizon is different. But as far as on the savings end, those are good goals. And it's good to have those goals and ranges. Where should I be for my age? I think that's very helpful. And some people said, wow, they might say, I'm 40 and I don't have that. Well, you can catch up, but that's, again, a reason to work with a financial advisor to figure out how to make that happen. I think that's really important.
Yeah. And
Right.
obviously, Tony, if you're not at those numbers, right? And now you're 50 and maybe you only have 2 times your salary saved. Now you have a really short amount of period of time, 15 years, if you want to retire at 65, in order to get, to 8 times whatever your salary is, which means you got to save a lot more money in order to get to your long-term goals.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really important to note. And this is really good. It gives people a starting point and some benchmarks to at least shoot for. And it is important. Now, but again, you've got to have a personalized approach, right?
Sure, you do.
How does that look?
Well, first of all, let's talk about your retirement age.
Okay.
And, obviously if you're 40, you're probably not thinking about it, but when you get to your mid 50s, then you're really starting to think about, when do you want to retire? Do I want to retire at 60? Do I want to retire at 65? Do I want to retire at 70? Obviously, if you retire at 65 or 70, the nice part about that, Tony, is you don't have to worry about health care, right? Because Medicare is going to be there for you. Where it gets a little bit more complicated is if, say, you do want to retire at 60 and you don't have a health care plan because you don't have a pension, from the company you work at, then now you can retire, but now you're going to have to go out and find, some type of health care insurance in order to fill that gap until you get to the Medicare age. But it's really important to be able to say, okay, if I want to retire at 60, am I on pace to have 8 times my annual salary saved? If not, it might make sense that you delay a few years until you can get to that 8 to 10 times your salary, but somewhere between 60 and 67.
Yeah. Yeah, and time continuing to work is a one solution, but you're right. When you want to retire becomes the next question. Am I saving enough? Well, then you have to start looking at, when do you want to retire? Those are the big questions, aren't they? How much I should be saving, and how much should I have saved, and then when do I want to retire, which really determines the whole thing. And so those are the two main questions you tackle, I would assume, when somebody
Sure.
comes into you to say, hey, I need to do some financial planning. It's like, okay, you're saving and investing money for retirement. That's the main reason everyone invests and saves, wants their money to grow. So you got to figure out when they're going to retire. And we don't always get to pick when we want to retire either. That's another wrench that gets thrown in once in a while.
That sure
But
can.
you should have a goal, right? And you determine that up front. When do you want to retire?
Yeah, exactly. And as what are some other things that kind of go into that, right? So if you want to retire, it doesn't matter if it's 60, 65, or 70. Now you have to start looking at, okay, what's my income going to look like? And what are my expenses going to look like? Is my home going to be paid off? Or do I actually have to keep paying the mortgage while I'm working? That just means you need more income in retirement, right? What do you plan on doing while you're retired? We talk about this all the time, Tony. While you're working, your most expensive days are your weekends. That's when you spend the most amount of money because that's when you're out and doing things. So when you retire, every day's a weekend.
Yep.
So you really have to make sure that you have a good handle and good control on your expenses. Do you want to travel? Or do your kids live in different cities? Do you plan on traveling to see the kids? Do you plan on maybe going to Arizona or Florida for 3 months of the year, or whatever you want to be able to do? But you have to start getting a good handle of what are my true expenses going to look like in retirement. And when we start talking about that too, Tony, we start talking about expenses. You also need to make sure that you need to know what your number is in order for you to make sure that you're paying all the bills. What are your true necessary, and then what are some of the extras that you might want to be able to do? And can your income plan and can your savings plan handle that? We start talking about income, right? Obviously, Social Security is going to be the foundation of that retirement plan. So you have to kind of load Social Security into your income plan. Do you have pensions? Do you have other type of passive income? Maybe it's rental income or something like that. But now you're going to be able to get a baseline of, okay, this is the income coming in. These are the expenses I need to pay. Whatever difference that is, it's going to come from your savings.
Sure.
And is your savings there? Is it going to be there for the long term, right? So people are living longer. We're planning for 25 to 30 years of retirement spending. So obviously, if you're 60, we want to be able to plan for probably 30 years in retirement, because odds are, if you're married, one of you is probably going to make it to the age of 90. So longevity is a big key to all this. And then the other part of all this too, Tony, is what's your investment growth going to look like, while you're working, and then once you're retired. You want to, obviously, as you age, you're going to get more conservative within your portfolio, but you can't be so conservative that you can't keep up with inflation. And I think everyone's realized that over the last couple of years on how big of an impact inflation can actually have on your monthly budget.
Yeah. Yeah, obviously it can. And so, you have to plan for certain expenses. You've talked about that on past shows. Do you plan on buying a motor home and traveling? Do you plan on taking the grandkids to Disney World, your first year of retirement, or every year in retirement? You've got a budget for that. Those are big expenses. So, you have to have that in your personalized plan, right? I mean, that's really important.
Yep, you really do. And when we start talking about, income now that you're going to need out of your retirement savings, then a good method to use is what we call that 4% withdrawal rule, Tony.
Yep.
And it's pretty simple. In order to kind of get to where you want to, for example, say you want to take $60,000 a year out of your retirement savings. Now, I'm not talking about Social Security or anything like that. I'm just talking about out of your savings. So if you want $60,000 a year, what you really need to do is multiply that by 25, which means you need to have about $1.5 million saved if you want to use that 4% rule and be in a situation where it's going to be there for as long as you are.
Right. Yeah, and so then it goes back to what you're saying. It really is important to know where that money is going to be coming from. Where are you pulling that money from? Is it all in the stock market? Where is it invested? So asset allocation comes into play. There are so many moving parts. You're just illustrating to myself, and hopefully our listeners and viewers understand this. You don't do this planning alone, because you need a professional. That's why you do this, Cory, is to help people with this. There are a lot of moving parts, but you're right. The 4% withdrawal rate has worked for a lot of people. You need at least that much if you're going to use that rate, like you say, to get up to, if you need $60,000 a year. Like you say, if you do the math, 60,000 times 25 is 1.5 million. But some even say the 4% rule, it'll draw down your accounts too fast, depending on where you have them. So you might have to, you might need to take a little less. It might be 3%. So that you have to live on. So you've got to calculate all this up front, don't you?
You do. And obviously, Tony, one of the things that we do when we go through the financial plan process is, we put maybe products in place that's going to be able to help you make sure that you have money for as long as you live too.
Sure.
So, I always say, if you don't have a financial plan today, you need to have one. The nice part about having a financial plan is we give you a snapshot of where you are today.
Yeah.
And we can kind of show you what that roadmap's going to be going forward. And the nice part about it is you can adjust that depending upon what your goals are. Which you might end up finding out, Tony, that you need to save more. So instead of maybe saving 10 to 15%, maybe you need to save 20 to 25% in your 50s. But until we go through and give you a plan, we're not going to know what that really looks like, right? So that's something to be able to make sure when you're working with an advisor, those are the type of discussions we're going to show you. Hey, it's pretty black and white. You're either on target or you're off target. And if you're off target, how do we actually get you back on target to be able to make sure you're going to have the retirement that you want to? When we start looking at on what you're actually saving, we always say this, Tony, if you're in a 401k or a 403b or whatever that is, and your employer's doing a match, make sure you're always getting that full match. It's free money. Think of that as part of your salary. Don't give any of that type of up, right? And here's the other part. You might actually need to save more than maybe your 10 times your salary, depending on what you're actually wanting to spend in retirement. That's a big part of it. But until you go through the process and we put together the plan, we're really not going to be able to tell you whether you're on track or off track, or what do you need to do in order to get back on track.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you have to adjust for your situation, right? That's a big part of this.
It is. I think everyone's situation is different. We're going to sit down and put together a roadmap for each, for your unique situation in order to get there. We talk about this all the time, but just because you have $1 million saved and it's all in traditional IRAs or 401ks, you don't really have that, because you got to pay taxes off of that. So the earlier that you can go in and work with an advisor to say, does it make sense to save money on the Roth side versus the traditional side? Because if you have $1 million in a Roth, that's $1 million of spendable money, because you're not going to pay any taxes on that.
Right.
So the way that you save is huge. It has a huge impact, on what your true net amount's going to be in retirement.
Right, because if you're saying if you have that $1 million in a traditional 401k or IRA, you don't have $1 million.
That's exactly right.
You might have 75.
750,000
or 750,000.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're in a 22% tax bracket, or 25, or whatever tax bracket you're in, you got to subtract that out. Yeah. But if it's Roth money, you don't have to worry about paying taxes, because you already paid taxes on it. And you want to make sure you have the right balance. We talk about that all the time, but there's so many times people come in and all their money's in a traditional IRA account, which means, yes, you've done a great job saving, but now you're just going to pay taxes on that for as long as you live as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And you're not, people don't understand it's a joint account. It's not all your money. So they get into retirement and they realize, oh, I've got $1 million. No, you probably have 750. The rest is Uncle Sam's. And so you need to make sure you haven't planned on the full $1 million and that you can live off the 750.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Obviously, when we kind of go through this, Tony, we're also going to talk to you about healthcare costs, right? That's going to projected to be able to go up. And those are just discussions that we're going to be able to have as well.
Yeah. There's a lot to it. I mean, housing, side income, and there's a lot of myths out there. So for our listeners out there, before we go, to get a good plan in place and figure out how much they should have, or if they have enough, when that retirement date's going to be, how can they get a hold of you, Cory?
Yeah, for our listeners out there and viewers, give us a call at 614-760-0670. Or you can always visit our website at safeharboroh.com. Just remember, all meetings are complimentary. There's no financial obligation. We're here to truly help to make sure that you have the best retirement that you possibly can. And there's a couple things I just want to end the show on, Tony, and that is just a couple myths versus facts, just real quick for our listeners, right? One myth I always hear is, well, I'll start saving when I make more money. Well, the fact is, you have to save much more later to make up for any lost time.
Yeah.
So save today. The other one that I hear a lot of is, well, Social Security is going to cover me. The fact is, typically about 40% of someone's income in retirement is Social Security. So it's not going to pay for what you truly need in retirement. About 80% of people over the age of 65 collect Social Security. And about 20% of those individuals, or 20% of the people on Social Security, that's all the income they actually have in retirement. Don't put yourself in a situation like that, right?
Right.
And here's the last thing I'll say. If you put together a financial plan, think of it this way. Retirement is not a finish line. It's freedom. And freedom starts with a plan. So if you have a plan, you're going to feel a lot more comfortable. You're going to be able to sleep better at night. And you're going to feel like you have that financial freedom because you did all the work that you needed to do in order to make sure that you're going to have the retirement that you want.
All right. Well, what's that number one more time so people can do that and have that?
Yep. Our phone number is 614-760-0670. You can always visit us online at safeharboroh.com.
All right. And that does it for today's episode of Financially Fit Radio with our host, Cory Sickles.
Thank you for joining us for Financially Fit Radio. Don't head into retirement without a strategy that addresses both income and taxes. For more information, please contact Cory Sickles at Safe Harbor Wealth Advisors at 614-760-0670 or visit safeharboroh.com now. Join us again soon for another episode of Financially Fit Radio.
Investment advisory services are offered by Safe Harbor Wealth Advisors, LLC, and SEC Investment Advisor. Insurance products and services are offered through Safe Harbor Retirement Group, LLC, an affiliated company. Safe Harbor Wealth Advisors, LLC, and Safe Harbor Retirement Group, LLC, are not affiliated with or endorsed by the Social Security Administration, the Federal Medicare Program, or any government agency. All matters discussed during the show are for informational purposes only. Each individual situation may vary, and the opinions expressed here may not apply to everyone. Materials presented are believed to be from reliable sources, and no representations can be made as to its accuracy. All ideas and information should be discussed in detail with one of our qualified representatives prior to implementation. Calling this number will direct you to a licensed sales agent.